Hey viewers, and in today's video we're going to be doing a typography scale for web design in Figma. My name is Roy, I'm a web designer. If you do find the content useful, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's get into the video. Okay, so just to look at our to-do list, we are going to look at a typography scale and line height in web design. So what we're going to do is I'm going to point out some inspiration. So something I'm going to shout out is things like Bootstrap, Tailwind CSS, Material, which is for Google, and the Human Interface Guidelines, which is from Apple. And in your own time, it's good to check these out, especially with their text sizes, so you have an idea of what they use for their platforms. And then one place we're going to check out is alistapart.com. So if you haven't seen this blog before, definitely check it out. We're going to then create text styles, and then we're going to learn how to change the font depending on your target audience. So you might have a sans serif font or serif font. We're going to see how we can do that with our typography scale. Okay, so just to kick it off, we are going to look at some inspiration, and the first one is tailwindcss.com, and this one I currently use quite a lot in my projects. I also recommended this to the startup that I'm working at. We are also using that on our system. We're using it for the app as well. So here you can see straight away the reason why you've probably seen a lot of my videos where the naming convention I've used is practically the same as this. Now the font sizing they're using the rems, but to keep it simple, we well, for example here, text base, you've got font size 1 rem, and then traditionally with the web it's all pixels. This is a different type of unit, but for example you can find a pixel to rem calculator, and in here straight away you can see that the base size of 16 pixels, which is the base of the web, is 1 rem. So yeah, this is a very good example. This is something I use a lot in real projects. So yeah, very good recommendation. And then the other inspiration is from Alistapart, and this website has just been around for absolutely ages. They give a lot of very good tips on design, on front-end development. And what you can see here is when you have a blog post, which is what we did last week, you can see when you're reading long form text, sometimes it's easy to read when it's a serif font, but headings you see the sans serif, and in here you just have a mixture of the two. So traditionally it's easier to read when it's a serif font for long form text. So for example, sometimes in books you're going to see serif font, and then for headings you got sans serif. So this is just an example of inspiration that you can look at when you're trying to find something to practice on. So let's go back into Figma. So we looked at inspiration, and the reason why I point out these is because we're focusing on web design, and these are very popular frameworks that a lot of startups, companies use. So it's a very good idea that if you're a beginner, it's good to get familiar with these. And eventually when you do work with a developer, they're going to be able to relate to you if you can point out certain resources or the reason why you chose a specific font size and typographic scale. So anyway, let's go and create some text styles. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is hit the T. We're going to click on the screen, and we are just going to say text hyphen base. Okay, so when we say base, this is going to be the base of most of your text, for example paragraph, and we are going to start off with the default web of 16. And then the other bit to tweak is the line heights, which is this property here. And what we've always encouraged on this channel is to stick to the 8-point grid. Everything is in multiples of 8 or divisible by 2, for example. And this will help eventually with spacing, which is going to be huge when you start designing for apps. And everything is going to be consistent when you have a baseline grid, you'll see eventually. So to keep it simple again, the line height for this will be 24 pixels. So again, we're just incrementing it by 8. And that is simply your text base. So the next thing to do is to go up and let's Command D. How many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 of these. We're going to select all of them. We're going to do Shift A. And we just created an auto layout just to line these up a bit better. We're going to space 40 between. So we have our base. The next thing we're going to have is text large. We are then going to have extra large. We are then going to have 2 extra large, 3 extra large, and then this one we could say text display. Okay, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So we've got six different sizes, and this is mainly what the web has. It's got 6 different headings. So just to go up, we're gonna the text large is going to be 24, and then the line height on that is going to be 32. And then this one, let me just check again, so 24, and then this one we're going to say 32, and then the line height on that is 40. So again, we're just using the 8-point grid. This one is going to be 40, and then we're going to go up to 48. This one we could say 48, and then we go up to 56. And what will happen is this is the foundation of a design system, or anything really. When you're web designing, when you're creating an app, creating your text styles at the beginning is going to help you in the long run, because if you need to tweak stuff, you can just go back into your text styles, which I'll show later on in the video. So anyway, 48, 56, text display. So display is when you have really large font sizes. This is when you want the heading to stand out. So usually we use the naming convention of display. Everyone has different naming conventions. This one stands out, so let's say that this is going to be 96, so we're going way big. And this is normally better if you can have a 1 heading, two words in the heading, and the line height for that, let's say 96 as well. So it's going to be solid, it's going to be tight. Okay, so we have got 6 different text sizes, and we are actually going to create another one. Okay, so Command D that, and the reason why we're going to create another one is because we can have a small size. Okay, and we're going to go down to 14, and we're going to keep the line height 24. So the reason why you have 14, there's things like form labels or copyright text, which shouldn't be that tiny, or you got captions. So 14 pixels is text small. Okay, so now we have our very simple typography scale, and this covers most of the different sizes. You've got 6 sizes, and we're referencing Tailwind CSS. We're looking at the web. That is our design decisions on the typography scale. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create styles for these. Now, one little tweak we can do is, again, if you're a beginner and you're starting out and you want to become a web designer, again, there's going to be so much competition when you go out and apply for jobs. And to stand out, to be high quality, even though I'm not trying to say that my stuff is the greatest, it's far from it. I'm still learning and growing. But again, if you want to stand out, little tiny details is when we have a very large heading, you can reduce the letter spacing because the gaps are quite big. So for example, I just hit -4, and now you can see the gaps is it's less, but it's a bit more pleasing to the eye. We can do the same for these, so I'll just say -2. Again, you can tweak these. And again here, I'm going to say -2. Here again, I think we'll leave it at that. But when you get small, that's when you want the spacing to be bigger. So I'll say 2%. Okay, so these are just little tweaks that we're doing to the font sizes depending on their size. So the general rule is when you go large, like pretty large like this, you want to increase the letter spacing, and when you go tiny like this, you want to increase the letter spacing. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to then create the text styles. So we just have to, the lazy way I do this is I click into it and Command C, and then go here, create text styles, and just use that same name, create style. Okay, so go in and we just keep doing this, text style. Okay, so before you know it, we should have our different text styles, and I'm just double clicking in. And we got that one there, we click in. Okay, so here we can see straight away, we can see our different text styles: small, base, large, extra large, 2, 3, extra large, and then text display. And that is it. And if you ever need to tweak these, you just come back into text styles and you just hit the settings. And then here, this is when you can start changing the properties. So things like the font weight, the font size, you can just change it from here, and then it will apply to everywhere else that you've used these text styles. Okay, so the next thing to do is we are then going to, let's create a sample, okay, because it's important to test it out. So we're gonna hit the F key for frame, and we're gonna make this an MacBook Pro frame. And what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna hit the T tool, and we're just gonna say heading, and we're just gonna use, so here straight away you can go here, and it defaulted to text display. So here we can just change it, and let's say we start with text extra large. We Command D that, and here you can get a plugin for a lorem ipsum. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly go to Wikipedia, and I'm just going to search up habits, because this is one thing that I encourage a lot, is building habits, building good habits, getting into the flow of creating text styles for a design system. So, and then again, the book I recommend is Atomic Habits by James Clear. You got to read that book. So, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this line here. It's good to use real text just to have a good example. So here I'm just going to paste that. Oh, didn't paste it correctly. Go back and Command C that. Paste that in. Great. And the heading can now be habits. Okay, so what we're going to do is this one, we're now going to make that base, and we're going to combine these into an auto layout. So Shift A, and we're just going to align this in the middle. Okay, now the spacing between those is, again, we can go with the 8-point grid. So we can say 24. So now we've got a very simple article. And now one of the things is this is way too, the length is way too much. So the term they use for this is called measure. How many characters per line? They could recommend up to 72 characters. So for example, if we just quickly look up measure in typography. So you can check this out, and it's the line length is the width of the block. And again, if I go into Wikipedia, I mean, there's a ton of resources, but you can see here 45 to 75 characters. Okay, so the very quick way to do this is you're just gonna reduce this down. But the way I tend to do it is, for the web, we're gonna use grids. So to create a very quick grid, we can go into frame, and then you can go to layout grid. And what we're going to do is we're going to say 8-point grid again. We're going to create how many columns? Let's say 6. We're going to have a margin of 80 on the left and the right. And the gutter, we're going to say about 40. And the nice thing about this is if I hit the F key and just try and get the width, the width is 1280, and this is another size in terms of the web, the breakpoints. So let me just delete that. So here, if I want to line this up, as an example, I can say, okay, let's go here, it snaps to the grid. I'm going to say that we want this to be around here, and then this one we now have to fill container, so it's going to be nice and fluid. So straight away we have got a very nice laid out text and heading, but again this is probably too long, so we can just reduce this there, and now that is looking pretty nice and simple. So again, we can just keep on creating another frame, so we can hit Command D, let's do it 3 times, and we select all of them, we hit Shift A, and then the spacing between those, again we can say 24. But another tip here is when you start mixing headings, you need to have the law of proximity. This is another term in design. So things that are close together are more related. This is basically grouping. So we're going to need to increase the gap here. So let's say we go to this frame, let's say 40. Okay, so now it's a bit more pleasing because you can even be a bit more. We can even reduce the spacing between these. So let's say 16. Okay, I think 16 is better. 16 and 16. Okay, and let's start with the largest one. Okay, so yeah, and again here we can say we want the intro text, so let's go to the large. Okay, this is looking pretty nice. Okay, quite simple, and we created a very simple grid, 6-column grid, and we're using the 8-point grid. A lot of the font sizes are all in the 8-point grid again, and there's a reason for that, because everything is going to just lay out correctly. The line height and the baseline grid, which we're going to do in the next video, you're going to see how well it lines up. So again here we've just created some very simple stuff. Let's say we create another text item, and this one is going to be small. Okay, so yeah, so I think we've just done this very quickly. And let's say we go 80 from the top, or let's say 160. Okay, so the next thing to do is the font that I've chosen or I've used is called Inter, which again is a very modern font. So the way to check this out is I can go here and I can then look at, I can go here, and I forgot to mention this, but the font I'm using is Inter, which is a very modern, clean font, and it's a sans serif font. But let's say that we want to follow the A-list apart style, where they have a sans serif heading and then a serif font for the body text. So all we have to do is just go back to base, and we then go in and we say Georgia, which is what they use. And this is another very popular sans serif font, and it's a default font for the web as well. So you can see straight away we've just applied that, and it then worked for every single style that uses text base. Another thing we want to probably do is just to test this one out. So that was text large. So if I go to text large, but even so, if we go back to A-list apart, some of them they actually leave this as sans serif, like the intro paragraph. But what we're going to do, just to show an example, is text large. We're going to go to text large and we're going to say Georgia. There we go. Okay, so this is another example of mixing a sans serif heading with a serif body text. Now the last one to show is if you have a target audience which is a bit more, let's say that the brand is a bit more fun. maybe a younger audience. So a good example is Clubhouse. So I'm pretty sure you've heard of Clubhouse, which is an audio chat app, and the font they're using is Nonito, right? So it's going to be a completely different style to all of these. It's still a sans serif font, but it's more round and bouncy for the fun. So let's say you needed to do that. Again, we just need to go in here and let's go to small. We just need to say Nonito. And again, we just go here and we just change these styles. It's just way quicker when you create a text style. And again, here we go to large and we just change this to Nonito. And was there anyone? Okay, yeah. So this one is text free. So again, it's probably just better just to go to each one because I can't remember which ones I've used. And here we go to Nonito. Here we go to Nonito. Okay, so again here we've created a very simple typographic scale. We've used a couple of different styles. So you can see here the Nonito font is round, bouncy, fun. So if the brand is fun, then this is the reason why you'd go for that font. And if you want something a bit more modern, simple, there was the Inter font that I used at the beginning. If you want long form reading with lots of text, then you're probably best off with a serif font, and a good example is Georgia. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, because the next video what we're going to do is the baseline grid. And as a sneak peek, when I say baseline grid, this is the vertical rhythm. So if I was to hit the plus key, and I'm going to then add rows, and we're going to then say 1,000 rows, we're going to say 8. Let's see if that is working. We're going to say from the top. Okay, so I've created a vertical rows or vertical grid, and it's 8 points. And what you're going to see here is what I assumed is you'd expect the baseline of this text to align with the bottom line of these. So you can see with this one, it is perfectly aligning the paragraph, but the headings are not. Okay, so even here, when you start mixing, these are not lining up correctly, and we're going to absolutely solve this in the next video. So stay tuned for that, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.